Today, we have the privilege to be joined by Kyle Snarr. Kyle Snarr has been a leader at multiple companies within publishing and advertising, including Vox Media, Flipboard, Tribal Advertising, and Struck, to name a few. He has a deep knowledge of the digital space, but has been more focused on the physical consumer products as of late, and really has combined those two in his latest company, which is Worn and Wound, where he's head of partnerships. Some topics we're going to cover today: authenticity and transparency. What does that mean? User understanding and testing, how to do that. Disrupting a traditionally difficult market like luxury goods. And brand enthusiasts. What are they and how to leverage them for your brand? Let's learn together. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how's it going? Glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast, man.
Yeah, we go way back. It's really good to see you.
Absolutely. What it's been, man, we probably met each other 12, 13 years ago, maybe more.
Yeah. I think it's been longer.
Oh, wow. Right on.
Yeah. Geez, we're getting old. For those unfamiliar with Worn and Wound, that's your current gig. Would you mind giving an overview of what that is?
Sure, no problem. So yeah, I am the head of partnerships for a digital publication focused on the watch industry. And so I actually came across this company probably about the time you and I met. I was running a pitch for the redesign of a website of a very, very kind of expensive watch brand. And in order to win that pitch, I had to study up a ton on the watch industry. And in the process of doing that kind of research, I came across a website that was a very fledgling website called Worn and Wound. What I loved about it at the time is that they were really focused on not the luxury end of the watch world, but a far more, what we like to say, approachable side of the watch world. And this was really kind of, I really liked the way that they shot their photography. Watch photography for decades has been glossy, a floating watch on a black background. And these guys shot their watches in natural light and made them look really more just accessible. And this was my jam. I kind of learned that I have an interest in watches through that pitch, which I won. Just going to go ahead and say that. Won the pitch and kind of got an interest in watches through this. And then this was my go-to resource for figuring out watches that could A, fit my budget, B, I think be a unique offering in the world of very kind of specific watches that people gravitate toward, have something different on my wrist.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate that, I started a small company of my own. And these were the first two people I reached out to just to kind of get some feedback on. And they immediately were like, hey, that's a great product. We'll put it in our shop. And they were my first retailer as they had started their own e-commerce portion of their website. Mm-hmm. And then invited me after a bit to start kind of freelance consulting for them on some branding and positioning, which I'm sure we can get into. And then was invited early last year, early 2022, to join their team full time. And it's been a wild and fun ride ever since.
That's awesome. One of my first questions was, who's the audience? And it sounds like you.
Correct. Yes. Active reader and listener. So Worn and Wound as a watch publication that's focusing on, like I said, the approachable end of the watch market. They have really cultivated a product enthusiast audience, right? So of course the product that's at the center of these enthusiasts' lives is a watch. But what we're kind of learning a lot more as I've been here and we've started kind of expanding some of the things that we feel like we have a permission slip to talk about and sell to them. These are gear and product enthusiasts, full stop. And we've kind of done some work. So the readers, the listeners of their podcast, the followers of their YouTube channel and their social media channels, these individuals, we've kind of developed our own, this happens all the time, but our own little name on how we kind of think about our audience and how we also set them apart from our competitors' audiences. And we refer to our audience as the savvy consumer. Excuse me. Let me back that up. We could refer to our audience as the savvy enthusiast. And so we call them the savvy enthusiast because, yes, they are product enthusiasts and they care deeply about this thing, but they're extremely savvy. And I love the word savvy because it technically has three kind of definitions or synonyms. Savvy, first and foremost, means knowledgeable. This audience is insanely knowledgeable about watches. They want to know all the details. They want to know all the specs. They want to know where it's made, what it's made from, who made it. And all of these things are a mission critical part of making a purchase decision. They're savvy in terms of budget. So they are not necessarily looking for a deal, but they do care deeply that the value of what they're paying is worth the money they're paying. And they have done enough research to know what that is. So they are savvy consumers. And then the last kind of synonym or definition of savvy means sharp. And these guys are sharp, and guys and gals, I should say. They care deeply about their, not just their watch on their wrist, but they care deeply about their choice of all their kit. Let's say their apparel, their other gear, their footwear, their bags, and all of the things that they kind of surround themselves with. They care deeply that those things kind of match aesthetically or match philosophically and kind of go together. So that's why we refer to them as the savvy enthusiast.
That makes a lot of sense. And when I first heard enthusiast, like first thing in my head was influencer. Someone that does talk about product a lot, has an audience, maybe uses that product in whatever environment. This sounds a little different. What do you think the differences are, or how can you highlight that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, influencer is definitely a term that marketers are hearing a lot about and paying a lot of money to regularly. I think that an influencer can be an enthusiast, but an enthusiast doesn't necessarily have to be an influencer. But both play important roles in, especially a product marketing or product centered service, like a publication that reviews watches, right? Yeah. So I think for me, like, an influencer is obviously, that's kind of a loaded term these days. An influencer can be someone who is a paid professional spokesperson, basically, or they can just be someone who is an evangelist of your brand and an evangelist of an industry, and you can tap into them in a more organic and less paid sense, but they're still influential in what they do and with who follows them. But enthusiasts are a little bit different, right? Enthusiasts, they transcend the transaction, right? They're in it because they have a true and real passion for the thing that they're enthusiastic about. They could be an auto enthusiast, an outdoor enthusiast. I suppose there could be I'm sure there's cooking enthusiasts and photography enthusiasts and every single
enthusiasts.
Podcast enthusiasts. Let's bring it on. Audio files for sure. Yeah. So I think what it is finding, it's learning as a product company where to find who and where those enthusiasts are grouping, and who are maybe some publications and or influencers who can exert energy to sway them, right? So in a lot of ways, Worn and Wound is an influencer to enthusiasts, right? Yeah. We've done the research to know that 49% of our audience has purchased a watch based on a Worn and Wound recommendation. And, that's not, that's a lot when you start thinking about the hundreds and thousands of, monthly followers and readers and listeners that we have. So I would say that enthusiasts are a secret weapon in the product world. I think there's plenty of product companies who go along their entire lifespan and have never ever invested in finding the enthusiasts in their industry and speaking to them in the right way. I think it's a really interesting scenario where plenty of companies probably very successfully have maybe gone the whole span of their company's existence without maybe even speaking to directly to an enthusiast, right? But when you do, you unlock a new level of authenticity, of very, very passionate buyers, but then you also unlock the ability to turn that enthusiast into let's say, a lowercase I influencer for you, and maybe some cases a capital I influencer.
Yeah.
Can I ask where you found success in identifying, or how you've gone about finding success in terms of identifying those enthusiasts and finding them?
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly for Worn and Wound, they found a very important opening in the watch industry space that wasn't being filled. So that space, and it's funny because they're a digital publication, but that space was actually in real life experience. So, I think this traditional Swiss luxury watch industry world, events are a big deal, right? Events happen every year. People spend exorbitant amounts of money on them, and they're typically a massive way to kind of show off what you got year in and year out. And they spend, they build cities upon cities of booths that are big as buildings. What in the more enthusiast space, there traditionally wasn't a space for an enthusiast to get together and not just talk about watches, but purchase watches, especially from more direct to consumer brands where there isn't a place to go and try on one of their watches. So the birth of the direct to consumer model, which is all digitally based, and all these great startups around the world who are building amazing products, particularly watches in this case. Watches have to be kind of tried on, and if you can facilitate a place where these very physical items can actually get on the wrist, then you can create a space where not only are people selling watches and trying them on, but enthusiasts are gathering and you're identifying them. So about 9 years ago, the Worn and Wound launched what's called the Wind Up Watch Fair, which has become the largest consumer-facing watch gathering in North America, and it is a place where the real life experience of meeting with an enthusiast is always going to be the best way to identify them. And so once they come to one of these fairs and have kind of realized that Worn and Wound is speaking to them in a language that is so authentic to how they feel, these become lifelong listeners and lifelong subscribers.
If I can summarize a little bit of what I think I'm hearing, it sounds like the key in this particular space was creating a place where a community can exist online through authenticity, through shared passion, etc. But the key to identifying the enthusiast has been the physical in-person side of things. So you've got the digital interaction, but the in-person events has been the key driver of you identifying and connecting with those enthusiasts. Is that accurate?
Yeah, precisely. And unlocking their potential. Okay. And I don't think that was no one set out to think, oh, this is how we're going to unlock the enthusiast potential. Right. It was more just seeing a need that didn't exist. How do these great direct to consumer brands get watches on people's wrists? Right. Totally. Let's fill that void. But once that void was filled, it was an instant realization that, oh, we have something extremely powerful that we've seen here. It's like this identification and unlocking of that enthusiast that then endears them to the publication and to the brands that we associate with for life,
Right. One of the things that kind of I've been thinking about here is just you talked about direct consumer, B2C often, but you also have customers and that you're working with. So you have both B2B and B2C. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So obviously we have the readers of our publication and who oftentimes purchase stuff from our online shop and attend our in-person events. Obviously everyone in the company is working to service that audience, the savvy enthusiast. So I'm, as head of partnerships though, my job is to facilitate ways for brands to authentically connect with our audience. So my customers, my direct customers are product brands. So whether those are watch manufacturers or other or brands and companies that manufacture other things too that want a watch enthusiast or savvy enthusiast to plug into their brand, regardless of whether it's a pocket knife or a whiskey or all kinds of things that we've actually kind of marketed to this very niche savvy audience. So yeah, so my job each and every day is to speak to brands, to figure out what their goals are, and then to create fresh and original ways that they can connect with our audience in a way that our audience won't reject and will accept into their daily digital lifestyle.
Yeah. Like you kind of alluded to this. So you're saying your audience, those that are passionate enthusiasts, are not just passionate about watches potentially and about other things. That's interesting because then you're untapping not just what you sell, frankly, but making those connections. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I would say, Warner Wound's going on. It's like I think it's year 12 right now. So like this is new. This is like a true kind of putting the time in to kind of cultivate a trust with our ability to represent and expertise in the watch category. And again, some of it was just a hunch and some of it's based on our own interests, but we started doing stuff, particularly on the partnership side of starting to talk about things other than just watches. Yeah. Part of this really was a functional need. So in the watch world and in other product worlds, the role of a publication that reviews and rates a product can get a little shady. So there's plenty of publications around the world, especially outside of the US where laws are maybe looser, that you can go out and pay for a review of your product and get a good review, right? Now,
isn't that like half of Amazon?
No comment. So for
no comment for me too. I take that back.
Yeah, at Worn and Wound, we care so deeply about our audience that we've really kind of crafted a no paid review policy that just exists. There's no way you can plug into our ecosystem and pay for a good review of a watch. Okay, so a lot of brands from around the world do ask us that. And so here I am as the head of partnerships tonight. The first thing out of my mouth is, oh, sorry, I can't give that to you. So what do I give them instead, right? And so what I can do is I can take their watch, I can pair it with other great comparable products, whether they're comparable in design or use or price point, and then give those objects to an amazing writer or photographer or videographer and have them go out to the world and just use them and tell a story about what you're doing with them rather than a review of how that particular product performs. And all of a sudden, when we started doing this, because this was just literally a way for us to say, okay, we have to do something other than a paid review. What are we going to do? When we started doing content of this manner and started showing our watches with a great pocket knife or a great backpack or, even like some other kinds of goods, a great whiskey, we started seeing our engagement starting to go up. And in a way that was really kind of told us, okay, not only is this advertisement kind of working with our audience, they're like into it. So we actually went to a point to actually create a branded franchise, sub-branded franchise around this kind of content. So just to let you know, we call our flagship branded content franchise is called Toolkit. And the whole concept is you take a watch, you pair it with other great objects, you give it to an amazing real person, and they go tell a photographic and narrative story with it, and we publish that story. Now, when we launched this campaign, we actually got on our very own podcast and made a pact with our audience and said, listen, our pact is this. We're not going to be doing, we haven't ever done, and we will not ever do paid reviews on Worn and Wound. However, we got to keep the lights on. So we're going to tell great stories with watches, and we're going to launch this franchise that we're going to make sure from the get-go. This is sponsored content. It looks different than our other content. It's labeled properly, but we promise you that this is going to be the best photography with the best storytellers, and it's going to be something that has value that you get out of each piece of content. There's going to be some real value that you take away from each of these posts. And so we kind of just put a podcast out there that said, this is what our plan is, and we're being extremely transparent about it, and we're going to make this promise to you. And since then, what's amazing is that these types of articles oftentimes perform better than a non-sponsored piece, which is wild to me.
Yeah.
that people are spending more time on screen with a piece of advertising. And then what's even more fun is I often get people reaching out to me, like, on Instagram DMs or whatever, just like, hey, when's the next toolkit coming out? And I just want to be like, that's an ad, right? This is this is advertising, but we literally have fans of this franchise because we took the step to not try and pull the wool over anyone's eyes. We are being hyper transparent. We're being very, 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 honest about the whole thing. And then we're also just putting the best creative we can. And you can see the heart in what we're doing, I think. Yeah. And I think people care, and they don't care that it's advertising at that point,
Yeah. Can I ask a little bit about kind of the audience or the user and your connection with them? So you use the word authentic quite a few times to describe your relationship with them. And I think you hit on something extremely important in the product world. I think authenticity gets a little undersold at times. I think we tend to overmarket stuff sometimes. And I think authenticity, particularly when you're talking a community like yours, is incredibly important.
Yeah.
As you talk about that, it kind of gets me thinking, your audience is based around a shared passion of, in this case, a fashion wearable, some apparel kind of, articles, etc., which are things that's an emotional connection that they've made with you, plus the gear that they're choosing. It's not simply a functional thing. There's a lot of things that can tell time, and then they've chosen other things. And so there's some identification that's gone on there. There's some, and you mentioned this earlier, some identification that they've bought into, that they're going full on in. And that's a really deep connection. Most product and marketing people would just love that connection that you're talking about. I mean, that's a really sought after connection. So, but in your world, it's a little bit different than some of the world that I'm familiar with. I'm familiar with software, and software, does feature A and solves problem B or whatever it might be. In the world of where it's identification, where it's emotion, where it's a little bit more subjective, there's things that change. It's a dynamic world that evolves over time. So I'm kind of curious, how do you keep your finger on what's changing and where things are going? How do you still remain relevant, I guess is the right way to say it.
Yeah, it's a question that obviously has plagued this particular industry because, like, bottom line is not a lot of people wear watches anymore. And it is no longer a necessity by any stretch. So the whole industry has pivoted to this emotional connection sort of opportunity. They've honestly, like, they have in a way, I think some people would think that they've gone back in time with, like, stopped using, or like the really big brands have stopped using things like quartz movements, and they're actually using strictly mechanical movements, which have been around for centuries and was the only way you could tell time back in the day. So there's this interesting nostalgia / like return to retro. I would say a little bit of retro, but even just more like just a tangible object. Maybe the things where we feel like we want to listen to the vinyl record and we want to shoot, film instead of digital. So there's that kind of trend that is an overarching backlash to, like, the digital centric world that we live in that surely is impacting the watch industry for sure. And I think even though the Apple Watch is like I think it's the top selling watch in the world, it still is training people to get something back on their wrist. And so we're seeing that people who wear the Apple Watch for quite a while and get used to having something on their wrist, all of a sudden they're looking at other objects to put on their wrist as well. So there is, like, it actually has benefited the watch industry that the Apple Watch has come out. So again, it's like, I think there are some macro trends that we're watching that is like general overarching backlash to just a fully digital lifestyle, where a mechanical watch can be a way of, it's like a symbol of unplugging. It's a symbol of a response and a kickback to that macro trend, right? So that exists, right? So in terms of staying ahead of that stuff, I think that something like the big moon swatch, I don't know if you heard about this, but the Omega swatch launch last year. So there is a very, very huge luxury brand called Omega. They make
Yep.
very classic luxury watches. They're the watch on James Bond wrist. They're the first watch on the moon. Mega important brand in the history of horology, right? And they're owned by the same company that makes Swatch, which are these plastic disposable little things.
I remember those. Yeah.
So about a year ago, they took their most iconic, most expensive watch and collaborated with Swatch to create a plastic, colorful version of it. And they tapped into the hype beast culture of like this, sneakerheads and the footwear world to release it in a very kind of like limited drop sort of way. It's interesting because we're talking about trends. We're talking about kind of staying relevant. They were able to take a company, a watch that is seen as extremely exclusive and unobtainable, and format it in a way that was far more inclusive and potentially attainable outside of a little bit of the headache of releasing it and not realizing how big of a hit it was going to be. But what that did is, they're now very accessible because they've kind of caught up with the demand. But when they first came out, they became scarce quick. But they still were trying to do something interesting, which was to create an accessible version of an inaccessible item. And in that, I think it was a really interesting way of taking advantage of a trend like the hypebeast drop mentality, but also just democratizing this luxury item and making it feel, again, another big macro trend, more inclusive than exclusive. Yeah. And it was like a lot of people who weren't into watches because of this really kind of a big zag when everyone else is zigging, started getting into watches, and we're still seeing that now.
So I was going to ask a follow-up question to my original question about who drives trends. Is it more the users or the brands? Mm-hmm. But the example you just gave is really interesting because you talked about some trends existing in the world, whether it be inclusivity or other trends, and a brand then utilizing those trends to change its own trajectory and, in a sense, add a trend to a new trend. So it seemed like your example there, it seemed like both were influencing the trends. Is that a common thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think this was magic, a little bit of magic in a bottle. They were in the right time at the right place with the right offering, and it did work. I mean, it's worked extremely well for them.
Got it.
And I think that's like a perfect scenario. I think people try and do that, but I think when you do take a few steps back and look at some of these macro trends that are happening, and then what you can do to, again, like maybe take a hard left when everyone else is going straight or turning right. It's the right thing to do.
Got it. Okay, sounds good. Every once in a while, in the world of trends and fashion and things like that, you see a company that misses the mark and has maybe misses the mark several times in a row. Why do you think that happens? Are they just not paying attention, or are they trying to take too many lefts when other people are taking rights? How do people? I guess where's the disconnect happen between what the users are actually looking for and the brands? Where have you seen that happen in this world?
Well, and so this world's interesting. Again, let's talk about the Enthusiast for a second, right? So the Enthusiast, one of the attributes I described earlier is really, really understanding like the value of the specs for the dollar that they're paying for it, right? So enthusiasts are going to be those consumer reports people. They're going to really like do their research, and they're going to come in. They're going to come well armed and understand what the competition has and what you're bringing to the table, right? So I think an example of this is like Seiko. So Seiko has been the enthusiast watch darling for like the last 20 years. Like people who, will spend a bunch of money on a fancy watch, let's just say Rolex. An enthusiast will be proudly walk up and show them their Seiko and be like, you know what? I've got more, like this thing is spec'd just as well as your watch, if not better. And I paid a fraction of the cost, and be very, very proud of that fact, right? So all of a sudden you have a brand who is taking off. They can't keep watches because on the tables, because the enthusiast community has like dubbed this brand the Enthusiast brand. And all of a sudden, like you can't be an enthusiast without a Seiko on your wrist. Okay. Like this is like this massive, and it's a kind of a vote of pride to say, like I've got I've got this thing on my wrist, and this proves who I am and that I know something that you don't know. So then Seiko, all of a sudden, they're selling watches left and right, and they see opportunity, right? They're like, we've got cash, we've got interest, we've got people who love us. So what are they going to do? Well, what do they think? What do you think they're going to do? They're going to try and move up market because they have the means now to move up market.
Yeah.
So what they did very recently is they took their higher end brand called Grand Seiko and spun it off into its own thing and like, let's go big with this. They took their mid-tier kind of luxury brand called Seiko Prospects, and they went up, like whole category up. And then they introduced a lower tier brand, or reintroduced, I should say, a lower tier brand called Seiko 5 to kind of try and continue to like keep the enthusiasts happy, you know? But in doing that, they sacrificed some of the specs for the enthusiast model. And all of a sudden, guess what? The enthusiast is going,
they're seeing through that.
Yeah, they see through it. It becomes all of a sudden it's Seiko's doing probably what any company would do. They would take advantage of the opportunity,
absolutely, right,
and the rise in popularity, and try and move up market, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And now, but they did that at the sacrifice of a lot of the enthusiasts, like fervor. So what that's done is it's left a huge opportunity for other competitors to come in and say, okay, enthusiasts, they aren't giving you what they used to give you for that price anymore. You have to pay a category higher to get what you used to get. But guess what we have? We've got this, and we've got this, and we've got this. And frankly, over the last year, a year ago, I think the enthusiasts were like, oh, there's Citizen. That's the other Japanese kind of analog watch brand. But 1 year later, because they're listening to enthusiasts and hiring enthusiasts, Citizens have become a new darling of the enthusiast marketplace, and they're cranking the hits out, and listening to the enthusiasts and giving them what they want in place of what Seiko owned outright maybe 5 years ago.
It shows the importance of brands or products really identifying their core users, their enthusiasts, whoever it might be, the promoters, and understanding why they're enthusiasts and why they're promoters, and being true to that. And it's very easy to get like one little thing wrong, but this is an example of somebody misreading that why and then doing something that alienated that group. So great example. Thanks.
Or just seed money and to try to go up market.
Right. Who can blame them?
Really, it's a good idea.
Yeah,
exactly. It's a decision we probably all make.
Yeah. Well, kind of on that note, like, I know that you've been doing audience and user testing and things like that. Like, how do you keep a finger to the pulse, both with qualitative and quantitative? Like, how do you do that so that you do really pay attention to those main things? How have you done that?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, we watch our analytics closely. We have the benefit of cranking out multiple articles a day at our publication. So as a company, like, the more content you can get out there and watch how it performs, the better. And it's hard when you that's not your primary product, right? When your primary product isn't an article and your primary product is all the other things you have to do. But like, being able to create more and more content, like, content is such a powerful indicator and a powerful, director on just what is working and what's not working. I think there's a way for us to also see what connections can be made. I used to work at a publication called Gear Patrol too, and at Gear Patrol, where they covered all kinds of things besides focusing mainly just on watches, you could often see what users were connecting with. Like, if one user. This was true of Flipboard as well. Like, I'll give a Flipboard example. This is a better example. So at Flipboard, which is a company that basically takes articles and then serves them up in a news app, right? We could look at those analytics and see that, okay, every single person who has read an article about chocolate also seems to read articles about coffee. It was just a fact. Like, you look at the data and you can see people who read articles about chocolate also read articles about coffee. That's just the way it is.
I can testify there's probably some truth to that.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, you could go to a brand like Starbucks and have some real interesting data to say, hey, listen, you need to invest in chocolate in a totally different way. than you have been in the past. And so for us, I remember when I was at Gear Patrol, I had a really similar pitch to Samsung, and because we could see that people who are searching for Samsung also read articles about pocket knives. Okay, so people who, you can draw an insight that says people who care deeply about what mobile phone is in their pocket also care deeply about what other things are in their pockets. So the insights that you can start drawing from the analytics and the data is more important than the analytics and the data themselves. So it's all about insights for us. We're always just looking for what's the insight, what's the handhold or foothold that we can grab onto to pitch the new idea. The other thing, to answer your question in terms of like the hardcore data versus the insights or the more subjective stuff, is going back to the thing I said earlier, which is creating spaces for in real life engagement. Yeah. There is nothing better than talking to the person who you're trying to get to understand better and to market to and to write stories for than standing across from them in a place like a watch fair and being surrounded by the thing that you both are enthusiastic about. It's like it all comes out, it all spills out, and you learn so much so fast in such a short amount of time. So I think as a company, if you are looking for ways to kind of connect with your audience better, yes, you can create more content and you can watch the data and you can search for the insights. But if you can facilitate in real life opportunities to meet with these people in not a, I'm not talking about doing like a survey, or I'm not talking about doing just like a group study. I'm talking about real genuine ways to connect and like talk about the things and the problems they're having, the desires that they have. That for us has been the absolute best way to tap into the needs and really learn what the triggers are to make product move and to change the behavior of your audience.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. Just getting across the table or coffee, whatever, to talk to somebody to understand the real issues and maybe some real opportunities, but then using perhaps those articles, content, and volume to kind of see those things out, to see if, is this real that you just heard, or is that a one-off, kind of a thing. Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. How has that approach changed for you? Sounds like it has throughout the years, more focused on that enthusiast throughout the years, but has that changed since, you mentioned Flipboard and others? Has it evolved?
Yeah, I think for me personally, just as a marketer in general, I think there's brands that have to be mass market, right? They have to speak to everyone as much as they can. But if you can find a way to zero in and really, I think, go for a quality play over a quantity play, I think for me and what I'm passionate about marketing, this has been the thing that has I've become more passionate about and specialized in a little bit more, is like being able to narrow your focus, and not try and be all things to all people. That's like a huge, I think, important decision you have to make as a company, and what your focus is in terms of your product.
Yeah, you mentioned Citizen before coming in with Seiko going out. How are you guys involved with that? How are you involved with that?
Yeah, so it's it's really interesting. We weren't marketing at all with Seiko prior to my coming on board. We had talked to them a little bit, but fortunately, again, they made a big decision of hiring an enthusiast, and that enthusiast knew of the power that an enthusiast publication like Worn and Wound could really offer. So, we started having conversations, and frankly, they just started. They put some trust in us, and they just kind of like let us kind of just go after it without a ton of oversight or supervision, to be honest. And it's always fun to present a campaign and get very minor notes back, and that's kind of what we experienced. And what's really interesting is that they kind of took advantage of the full offering that a publication like Worn and Wound can put together. So again, I mentioned it before, but Worn and Wound has this digital publication. They have an online shop, and they have these in real life experiences. And what they did is they kind of went all in on all three. They said, okay, we're going to let you guys tell the stories that you think should be told. Mm-hmm. We're going to let you then connect directly so that you can sell that product that you're telling stories about. So instead of having the URLs go to their website, they're just letting the URLs go to this website. This keeps people within the ecosystem, less clicks, more familiarity, safer buying scenario, a lot more trust. And then really kind of came in as a strong, supporter of our in real life events. And then all of a sudden they feel like they're one of us. And it is weird from time to time. It's like you almost get that feeling like we're on the same team in a very real way. Mm. And that's always great to feel like with any client that you have that feeling that you're all on the same team. But they kind of let us live it, and so have they.
Yeah, and so what was the outcome of that? I mean, it sounds like it's gone well, I think.
Well, I mean, like without giving away too much, I mean, I would
you
say
don't have to get the numbers, but I'm just curious.
They're easily one of our biggest clients at this point, and we now have increased the amount of SKUs that we sell on their behalf. We've launched products for them so that have exclusive launches that they are not giving to anyone else. And we've also started doing white label advertising for them as well. So we're creating the content that then may or may not run on our website, but definitely runs on theirs. And we're kind of the creative force behind the scenes, concepting, executing, and powering the stuff that, not all of it, but some of the stuff, the enthusiast related stuff that's out there in market for them.
Right. All based upon the fact that you guys discovered that audience.
Yeah. and have cultivated that degree of trust. Yes.
Yeah.
Trust. Yeah. With authenticity. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a question here. We're kind of coming towards the end, but I had a question. Sure. The edge, a lot of your work throughout your path has been in branding, has been marketing, has been connection with the outside world. You're taking a product and really connecting it with the outside world. That's what your current role is all about in terms of the company, the media company itself, is that connection. And we just set an example right there where that connection is essential to then the success with Citizen in this particular case. So it wouldn't exist without the other. So that's, as I think about this podcast and this chat with you, I feel like that's a really common theme, is this kind of this deep awareness and connection with the user, the importance of that, the value of that. When you're going to market with a product and or building the product, adjusting the product based upon what users are looking for. So as we think about, people listening to this, what sort of advice would you have to somebody who really wants to foster that? Would you have any sort of tips or tricks that you've seen work really well in your career throughout time in terms of really fostering that connection with those users?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to become an enthusiast yourself. You have to learn to think like the enthusiast. And so, I know for a fact that, I'll just take Citizen for one more example. The people at Citizen, they listen to the Worn and Wound podcast and other podcasts. They follow everything. They follow the Instagram handles. They read the articles. They really, really, really if they weren't an enthusiast before, they make themselves into one. And so you learn when you're down in the trenches and you're seeing how people, comment or or interact with all of this stuff, you start to train yourself as to, okay, I got to think like they think, and so I think really committing to the enthusiast mindset yourself is crucial. And we think about this. It's really easy to think about enthusiasts once again in these kind of product marketing categories, but you guarantee there's software enthusiasts and there are health insurance enthusiasts. Absolutely. And there are you've got to go to where they're group coming together and where they're having these discussions and throw yourself headfirst into them.
Oh, that's fantastic advice. Because I think so many times, companies are just content saying, we've built a great product. Come to us and come check out our great product. Join our world. And I think what your advice is saying is there's a world out there that exists. People are passionate. There often is that shared passion. make that a shared passion. And then once that's there, then the connection can be authentic and real and do something,
Correct.
have some value.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it.
Great advice. Great advice. Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd appreciate it if you could leave a review of the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to help spread the word. Our podcast is produced and designed by Jeremy and Joshua Wold. You can find our show archive and transcripts at productsforpeoplepodcast.com. We look forward to seeing you for our next episode. And in the meantime, we hope you experience some really great products. Thanks.